am here with Indy Guha, who is the Vice President of Growth Marketing at Signifyd.
Sounds so grand when you put it that way.
I try to make things sound grand.
I will take that.
Okay. Also an active board member and has a great venture capital background, which we're going to dig into as well. I want to start with what I call behind the boardroom. So give me the do's and don'ts of being an executive in a board meeting, how to better manage the board.
Sure. It's easier than people probably make it out to be. Ultimately, as a board member, all you care about is, hey, there's somebody thoughtful who's thinking through what the strategy should be and aligning programs to that strategy. So as an exec, when you walk into that room, I think it's being able to crisply articulate what you're trying to accomplish, how the different resources line up to those goals, and candidly just being able to back that up with some numbers.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously the devil's in the details, but if you can kind of paint that picture for people, the conversation tends to be pretty easy because there's a lot of trust implicit in just sharing that story. And certainly as a marketer, you should always be able to construct a thoughtful story about everything you do. So hopefully it's not as stressful as it can be.
Now you're the VP of Growth Marketing. What's on your dashboard and ultimately I would think goes in your board deck?
Everybody's got their own favorite marketing dashboard, but you know,
that's part of the problem.
I know there's a lot of dashboard creep.
We got to get aligned.
Yes, yes. So we spend a lot of time looking at in-quarter active pipeline and what sort of coverage relative to bookings target. Everybody else does too. And there's a couple of different ways we think about that, kind of aggregate active pipe versus advanced stage active pipe. But all of that is meant to make sure we're focused on generating pipe and activity for this quarter, not just some future state.
Okay.
There's a whole other set of metrics around new pipeline creation. And then for each of those buckets, we tend to look at geographic goals. We launched our European business last year. And as I'm sure many of Sixth Sense's customers sort of live with, you really do want to think about your pipeline by geography, and especially if it's a new market, almost sort of over-investing in that pipe because your conversion rate might be lower out of the gate. So there's a geography overlay, and then there's a pacing overlay. It's great to have metrics that you care about at a monthly or quarterly level, but I think it's much easier to have action-oriented conversations with your team if you then unpack those into, right, what does that mean for this week? What does that mean for the next 2 weeks?
Gotcha.
And I'm a big believer that dashboards shouldn't be, something the CEO looks at once a week or once a month, or the board looks at once a quarter. Ideally, the same dashboard, or maybe a slightly busier version of it, should be what the team lives in.
Oh, 100% agree.
Same metrics up and down the reporting tree. And so, every team meeting, team-wide, subgroup, doesn't matter. The first half of the meeting is always what's happening right now, and tactically what do we need to get done to get to where we need to go. The second half of the meeting is, all right, let's expand the frame to this month or this quarter. And so the metrics kind of are built that way as well.
I'm more of a monthly gal, but we can look at weekly as well.
Sometimes there is a movement on the weekly metrics, and so the reality is a lot of times the picture emerges on more of a monthly cadence, but it's a good way to ask yourself tough questions.
Yeah, for sure. And look at activity level. Do you have the right activity level
and
to drive what you need to drive?
Precisely, and I think, maybe because there's sort of too much digital noise, I feel like field marketing's had a big resurgence across the board because folks value that in-person interaction. The flip side of that on this reporting topic is field events are more expensive. And you really want to make sure you have sort of a speed to lead culture, a follow-up process, and that's going to show up in the weekly reporting if it's working. So you kind of need all of that to hang together.
Agree, absolutely. So a lot of executives think about maybe a next move as being on a board and as being an advisor. How do those spots get filled?
As an operational executive, the most linear path to becoming a board member is you're viewed as a subject matter expert on something that a set of companies cares about, right? So since both of us work in tech, I think there's always this question of how do you put magic in a bottle and create a category and place yourself at the center of the category. And if you're associated with companies that have done that well, there's always going to be a need to bring that expertise into a next wave of companies that are going to have to do the same thing.
So either like a functional pattern or maybe an industry specific pattern.
Absolutely. So I think the other way to think about it is, you've seen operations at scale within your industry, and that expertise is valuable to a company that wants to make sure they have the right mentorship in place for their management team. Those can obviously overlap, right? Part of your expertise could be the fact that you've done something, like the category creation example, that people need to learn from. However you solve for it, I think the 1-2 punch is obviously having that track record of success, but then also candidly being known for that track record of success. There has to be the industry network, the referenceability, the speaking slots at conferences that sort of leads to recognition of you as an expert in that field.
So you kind of have to have a plan that's where you want to go a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny how you need to actually work towards things when they're worth getting. Yeah.
Is it worth getting?
I think so, for a couple of reasons. It's really easy in the daily grind of hitting numbers, hitting targets, trying to do ambitious things, to get very sort of tunnel vision in like, what do I need to get done this week or this month? This week. It's January. I'm already behind.
Totally. I'm stressed out just talking to you.
Sorry. I think, there's lots of research unrelated to marketing that shows when you give people a chance to be creative, their brain has a chance to connect the dots on unrelated things and come up with some unique insight. And I'd argue stepping out of your own shoes to help somebody else think through a set of problems, which is what you would be doing as a great independent board member, is a really good way to actually use those creative juices, and it often helps you with reflecting on what you're trying to get done as well. It's a great way to meet talented people, and ultimately everyone lives or dies by the quality of their team. So I think there's lots of good reasons to aspire to that.
What makes a good board member?
Don't assume you have the answers. I was probably a little too quick with that response, but to unpack that a little bit, I think the flip side of being brought into a board as a domain expert, as the industry veteran, as the subject matter leader, is you might get trapped in that persona a little bit, and you sort of feel like you always have to have the last word on that topic, or you inadvertently undermine the management team even if they have valid thoughts on that particular area. And so it would kind of be like, in you building out your own team, you bring in great people, but you always tell them what the answer is. And now they don't feel empowered to kind of spread their wings. And so I think that blend of you come to the table with expertise,
but let them try and learn and grow a little on their own.
And keep. If you hold a knowledge of what's state of the art, definitionally state of the art is not static, and so work together with a management team to kind of keep evolving the state of the art. And I think that learning mindset or that growth mindset works better for everybody around the table.
So let's talk about the word growth.
Fair enough.
Because I'm seeing this in everyone's title.
It's true. It's very trendy these days.
Everyone's popping growth in there.
Yeah.
What is that about? What is that? Did you push for that? Did they push for that? What does that mean to you?
Sure.
Should we all change our titles?
So, look, part of why I like the title is it encompasses block and tackle things marketing lives or dies by, pipeline creation. But it allows you to integrate that mindset and those outcomes with things that are a little broader reaching and should be part and parcel of a holistic set of strategies, right? So let's pick an example. Partner marketing and how to really build out channels, how to build strategic technology partnerships might be something that sits in this kind of no man's or no woman's land across marketing and sales and products.
But if you're growth, you just go and grab it.
It gives you a mandate to say, hey, one of our best sources of pipeline, vetted, relevant, overlapping, actionable pipeline is going to be people that are buying complementary solutions. Let's design what that shared set of customer purchase decisions look like, and then let's go talk to those companies to go build those relationships at the right executive layer.
So you think it provides a little bit more of an umbrella to, I always talk about in my own career, just finding dirty closets and going and reorganizing them.
Potentially, yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing. Like, as long as it's driving towards growth, gives you that purview to...
Yeah, and I think it, candidly, so let's connect a couple of these dots. I think customer marketing is another one of those functions that's really belatedly coming to the front of the line as something everybody should be good at. If you look at the last 5 years of tech IPOs, every single one of those companies does a great job building a customer community, building evangelists, making their customers look like heroes, and,
But who owns that? Where is it? Why isn't it more seriously?
Right. Now, if you wanted to be analytical about it, customer marketing is critical to hitting pipeline goals because, how do you beat a sales pitch that involves inviting your prospects to a field event that is anchored by existing customers, and your existing customers just talk about their use cases and their results, and there may not be any salespeople in that room, but it's a far more effective sales pitch to the modern buyer than being badgered by a phone call cadence program. So I would argue customer marketing in this era is the single most important building block for a sustainable organic pipeline, demand gen. But if you didn't have a broader mandate as a marketer to go build out those programs, it becomes harder to kind of connect those dots and have them work together.
What about sales and marketing alignment? That's another one, a nirvana we all strive. That and a customer community and we're set, right?
Sure, yeah. It's probably, that sounds like a good recipe. Let's go do that. It's sort of like telling someone to eat their vegetables. Like, you have to.
Captain Obvious.
Yeah, or like you should get more exercise. Like you should have an aligned sales and marketing team. Sales and marketing misalignment happens when you get in a food fight on attribution, on marketing generated pipe versus sales generated pipe, and is the marketing generated pipe good, or is the sales team using the pipe correctly, and that whole dance. I think the reality is that attribution model is impossible in the modern world.
But you have to have an attribution model.
You do, but on some level, last touch attribution is a joke because in any complicated product, there's multiple buyers, multiple buyer personas. One might have come through a marketing field event, another might have been activated by a cold call from an SDR, a third might have come through an analyst referral. And like, how do you solve that? And I think companies get way too caught up in sort of statistical black box, overly engineered attribution models. And so on some level, just having a shared goal of this is how much pipeline we need, we don't really care how we get it, marketing should feel empowered and rightful in finding kinks in the sales process where there's leakage, and conversely, sales should feel empowered to ask for slightly different marketing program mix. Easier said than done, obviously, but getting out of that attribution black box is so critical to just having a what do we need to get done conversation.
So I'm going to challenge that a little bit, because then you go to make an investment. And how are you going to prioritize investment if you don't have a good way to look back at attribution?
Fair. I think it's always interesting to think about what the first touch was, what the activation point was. I think you can tune your attribution a little bit to value exec level relationships that come through certain programs only differently. I think we've all lived through the pain of trying to engage an account bottom up versus top down. The problem is once you open that door, it starts getting very complicated very quickly. And it's really hard to kind of pull out of that and say, hey, can we just can we get out of the false precision of where did this lead come from and who started the conversation?
Yeah, I think I mean, in my experience, it's more an indicator not versus a rule book. And you have to look at that, but as well as some of the more qualitative things around, does it tie to the strategy and to sort of prioritize programs?
Absolutely.
Any influential mentors or moments you can share?
A lot of the success I've had came from being contrarian, and so taking a risk, but having it be as informed of a risk as you can have it be. About 8 years ago, the track record of East Coast venture capital firms successfully expanding to the West Coast was essentially non-existent. But that was the opportunity that presented itself. Hey, help Bain Capital Ventures open its West Coast office. All the conventional wisdom would have been, hey, that's gonna collapse even if there's a Bain Capital brand on it. Go find somewhere else to spend your energy if you want to move back to the West Coast. The reason for being contrarian was I really liked the person I'd be going on that journey with as a mentor and a collaborator, guy named Ajay Agrawal. You know, I actually kind of researched out, hey, what does the ecosystem look like? What are ways in which you could differentiate your products? The same process you would go through as a product marketer, essentially. Did Bain Capital Ventures have something unique to offer West Coast founders? Bain Capital is incredibly connected in the Fortune 5000, and that ability to help founders engage potential customers east of the 101 was pretty different and very valuable. And so that was enough for me to take the plunge. And it was really hard for a couple of years. We didn't really have the referenceability for customers, in this case founders of tech companies, to want to take meetings with us. But as we built out these customer development programs, founders here in the Bay Area want to meet east of the 101, I now had a great reason to call founders, and that led to a great set of investments from the Gain sites of the world to the optimized leads to the Six Senses. And the West Coast grew from less than 10% of Bain's business to over 60.
Congratulations.
So, it was an incredible run. And I think with that came a lot of tailwind professionally. I got to become a partner there at 32, just got to take on a lot of responsibility. And I think, it's that combination, right? You got to trust and love the people you're going to go to work with and try to do something difficult with. The thing you're trying to do shouldn't just be difficult for the sake of being difficult. It should be something where you have some vision for how you could bridge the gap. And then hopefully, if those two things come together, there's a prize worth pursuing.
So wrapping up, we talked about board preparation.
Sure.
And what I took away was you have to have a plan and then a strategy for how you're going to reach that plan, and then be able to report in a meaningful way on progress. So pretty basic. We probably overcomplicate it. So that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. We talked some about dashboarding, and whether it's weekly, monthly, but a very time-based, start the meeting with the dashboard, dig into the data, then talk about what you're going to do around the data.
Can you tell I'm a marketer who used to be in finance?
Hey, I used to be an accountant. We joked about that earlier.
Sure.
Got to know where it all is going. So I love that. I loved some of the things that you talked about, like people going on the journey with you. And it sounds like, you can do all the calculations and build the matrix of do this or don't do that, but at some point you just have to trust the people you're working around. So that was really interesting. And then I think the biggest takeaway is customer marketing, right?
Yes.
Number one priority for all of us, and it needs to be more top of mind perhaps than it is.
I would say so. I think putting on a couple of my different hats, as an investor in tech companies, we're at this moment in time where everybody's toolkit is very complicated. CMO has 30 different tools that roll up to them, right?
I know.
And so if you're going to be just another tool, or worse, an invisible API call without that personal connection to what is this product and what problem does it solve for me as a customer, you're asking for a churn event. Mm-hmm. Either because...
Or price or
something.
Yeah.
The way you counter that trend is by having real, authentic relationships with your customers, understanding their pain points, their priorities, hopefully actually making sure you solve them. But there's a whole body of work that has to bring that together and create the surface area for those conversations to happen. That could be regional meetups, it can be small group dinners, but I think, again, if you look at the companies that have gotten to IPO scale, every single one of them has overdeveloped this muscle, and I don't think that's a coincidence.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks
A
for
lot
having
of
me.
great takeaways, and look forward to having you back.
Sounds good.